Hi, my name is Christian Devine, and welcome to Retro Viw, a safe zone for physical media. I hope you're all doing well. And I wanted to, first of all, thank you all so much for subscribing. I've hit over 200 subscribers so far, which for a channel I started a year ago and don't have a constant flow of uploads, that's pretty good, and I'm always happy to expand the physical media universe in any way that I can, and that's one of the reasons I started the channel. And it's kind of an offshoot of a series of clip shows that I've been doing for years that I also dubbed Retro Viw as a means of exploring the way that culture reflects and refracts. And in the case of movies or music or games, etc., there's always an interesting cultural construct and context around media. And I like to explore the subtext of what that means. For instance, one of my Retro Viw shows is about the history of drug use in movies, or the history of eco-horror films, etc. And so this channel is, of course, designed to focus on physical media, which seems to be more popular than ever, despite the fact that our choices are seemingly more limited in terms of what we have and streaming, although there's some really great things streaming out there, and there's certainly nothing wrong with streaming, and I certainly stream lots of things. There's just certain things that I want to own. I consider myself more a connoisseur than a collector, and at some point when I have a wing or a museum, I certainly will have all of that extra stuff in there. But for now, I just appreciate having the media that I know that I'm going to partake of or dip into, like a little museum or a little library. And so that's what this channel is doing, and also pointing out the way that I personally experienced a lot of this media for the first time, because that's always interesting to me when I watch people discuss media, is how they experienced it for the first time. And so I could say a lot more, but I want you to keep watching. And once again, I just wanted to thank you all for retro viewing as you are, and liking and subscribing and passing on the word as we all are doing here. And as I said, it's important to have a record, I think, of who we are and what we are before that's lost, and for future generations to say, what were they thinking? And so with that in mind, I thought I would take a dip into the past, as I want to do with physical media, and explore a film that is not necessarily well known, but certainly has a very big cult following, and it has a kind of special place in my memory, and there is some nostalgia involved when I talk about this film, although I am fully aware of its faults as they are. And this film is very appropriate for Independence Day weekend, since it prophesizes that on July 4th, 2025, a great robot war will begin and the AI will take over. I'm talking, of course, about Toho's unique 1989 hybrid of Godzilla, James Cameron, and Howard Hawks' Gunhead.
My God, look at this junk.
Gunhead 君、スタンディングモード。Roger.
Now, I first saw Gunhead way back in the dark days before the internet, when I was working at Tower Video, rest in power, and talk about physical media. And those were the days and nights. And also it was a time when cool cultural items weren't accessible, so you had to be lucky enough to find people that were passing them around, etc. And so one of my co-workers gave me a VHS tape that was loaded with all sorts of goodies from Japan. And so on one great Friday night that I'll never forget, I had my pizza and half a tab of an unnamed, uncontrolled substance, since the statute of limitations has passed. And I just had a fantastic Friday night. And the tape had a series of just non-connected Japanese trailers and movie clips and anime clips, and once again, things that just weren't accessible. You had to, go to comic stores or comic cons or be lucky enough to be in West or East Coast cities where stuff came easily from overseas, was imported. And I was already a huge fan of anime and kaiju, etc., like all good geeks were at that time. And so it was just very exciting to have all these kind of random clips and looks into potential future films and anime that I'd want to check out. And so they had things on there like a Golgo 13 trailer and a trailer for Godzilla vs. Biollante. And then there was a feature, which I wasn't aware there was going to be on there. And I didn't know what this film was, but it was from Toho. And it started out with this really super cool backstory about a robotic island that decided to take over mankind one day. And then this pirate team comes into this island to steal refuse and get involved in hijinks.
Cute.
I have to stop because when I start talking about the plot of Gunhead, it just falls apart because I was watching it, of course there was no subtitles, so I had to glean the basic story of it. And to this day I'm unsure of the basic story of it, like I think many people are, so I've actually relied on other people's synopsis of the film. And I've seen it so many times, but it does have a very convoluted plot, and of course I've never seen an actual proper subtitle version of it. Now, one of the cool things about Gunhead is that it was co-written by James Bannon, and there's Americans in the cast, and they kind of use a mishmash of different languages, Japanese and English, which I think is fantastic because it does create this kind of futuristic cyberpunk Blade Runner style world, which is exactly what the director was going for. But I was immediately impressed by the visual style of Gunhead, and it had this very cool James Cameron-esque style of special effects and kind of course, classic old school Toho miniatures, but really done on a, like the most dynamic level they could at that period. And so the opening of Gunhead is fantastic, and that, just the first, 10 minutes or so of the film really pull you in. And then after that, your mileage may vary, depending on, how much you can take the convoluted plot. But there's all sorts of other pleasures to be had through the course of Gunhead. And so I just had a blast with it the first time I saw it, even though I didn't fully know what was going on, but I got the basic gist of the story that once these pirates are on the island, they reconstruct this robot, Gunhead, to battle with the AI to get out of there, basically. And their pirates are there to get this substance known as Tex-Mexium. Yes, Tex-Mexium.
I mean, look at all that cheddar.
So Gunhead starts with a really great premise, which is these, flying raiders in their cool, very liege Matsumoto flying ship. So the film has a really wonderful visual style immediately, and the backstory about the AI island taking over is pretty cool. And there's a fantastic music score by Toshiyuki Honda. I want to make sure I'm saying these names right. And that pulls you in immediately. And it just has a very wonderful synth, upbeat, cinematic synth sound. And Masato Harada creates a pretty cool visual world. And like I said, I love the mishmash of English and Japanese languages. And it's somewhat awkward a bit, and as it can be sometimes when American actors are working overseas, but I think it just plays very cool. And you immediately are introduced to our hero, Brooklyn, who's the kind of reluctant navigator, played by Masahiro Takashima. And he's a very charismatic actor who's been in a couple other Godzilla films and other Toho films. And so once they get to the island, they discover, like I said, the Texas Rangers who are there investigating this biodroid who got to the island. And once again, please don't ask me to explain all this. I'm just not sure.
Cute.
The Texas Ranger is played by Brenda Bake,
Anybody got a match?
and she's an American actress. And she's clearly been instructed to do Lauren Bacall.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.
So imagine Lauren Bacall in Aliens, and you pretty much get this performance. And some people, I'm not sure, understand that she's doing Lauren Bacall, and they don't like the performance. I understand exactly what she's doing, and it's wonderful. I think she's fantastic, and it immediately creates a fun relationship between her and Brooklyn. And Lieutenant Nin has got a really strong personality also, so it's a nice balance between the two.
You know, the true hero doesn't think about what he's doing.
He doesn't even know he's a hero. He does things because he knows he has to.
And I wish the film had, more focused on them together and not split them apart. And I like the relationship of all the pirates in the beginning. And it's kind of, like I said, got this, Howard Hawksian kind of bonding thing going on. And the film would have been great if it just would have been those pirates on Island HAO trying to, battle the AI with Lieutenant Nim as a foil, etc. There's just a lot of convoluted story points, and it comes together, cool little moments, and once again the soundtrack really carries it through. Gunhead even has an 80s montage scene, which is very cool. The music is peak 80s cool montage music also. And it's kind of the peak of Toho miniature work. And so you get to see a lot of really awesome state-of-the-art, cyberscapes. And Gunhead itself, the mech, is obviously designed to be kind of a Macross riff from the same designers, in fact. But it's not a very successful design and doesn't have a really strong, to me, visual point of view the way that other mech have. And I think that's one of the big flaws of Gunhead, is that Gunhead itself just doesn't look that cool. And it can do some transforming things, but some of the photography doesn't really take advantage of its shape, and it can get very chaotic, and a lot of it just comes out looking like survival research laboratories or robot wars, etc. Gunhead has got a very fascinating history. I won't go into all of it. There's some other, I'll post some links to people that have done some really thorough analysis of the film's history, and so you can go watch those. I think it's pretty interesting. But basically, this was supposed to be a Godzilla film, and it was kind of at a time when they were asking audiences to come up with Godzilla stories, and so one of them would have been Godzilla battling this AI on this island, which still sounds pretty cool. And so they basically refurbished that for Gunhead, and not to be confused with Gundam. It was produced by Toho and Sunshine, who created Macross, another famous anime, mech anime. And so this was going to be basically the first, big live-action mech feature. And it had quite a big budget and a lot of publicity, and a very, from what I've heard, a somewhat troubled production and post-production history, which is apparent in the very convoluted editing of the film. And so when it was released in 1989, it was not a success, and it was pretty critically ravaged. And you can see why. I don't blame necessarily the critics, because I think the film doesn't totally work, and it's not a film that necessarily was going to work on mass audiences. And so you have to kind of appreciate what Gunhead is and, not what it isn't.
Cute.
But I love the film immediately just for the vibe, and it just left me with that feeling at that time period in 1990 where I was excited about the future and the new decade, and Gunhead just felt like a really great cyber preview of the next decade. And it does have a very forward-looking style to it. And it's reminiscent of Blade Runner and Aliens, of course, but there's still kind of a really neat cyber punk feel to it that is more, culturally, reminiscent of the 90s and the 80s. But a film like Gunhead that's so unique, of course, would eventually develop a fan base and a cult following. And I became slightly obsessed with it, and when I went to Japan for the first time, only a year later, I was very excited to find the Gunhead soundtrack in Tokyo, and a Gunhead video game, and some other Gunhead items leftovers.
For the most excitement, you must play the PC Engine. Gunhead has just gone over the speed limit.
But there's never been a really great official domestic release for it. And it's been, I haven't checked out all of them, but it's been dubbed, which I just won't watch the dub version. And I know that when they did release it for the US market, it was actually turned into an Ali Smithy film. And if you know anything about what that means, that's nothing good. Alan Smithy is a moniker that directors give to films that they don't want their actual names on. And so whether this came about contractually or Harada just simply said, hey, what you did to with this dub is so bad that you can just take my name off it. I'm not exactly sure the backstory of that, but nonetheless, the US dubbed version of Gunhead is an Ali Smithy film, and all that implies. Now, I've always been rather surprised at how critically reviled Gunhead seems to be in terms of what I've read over the years online. And I'm assuming it's because most people have seen that terrible dubbed version. But people are very unkind to it and brutal with it, in fact, in a lot of places, and not necessarily seeing all the very cool stylistic elements that I think are there. And like I said, I can't tell somebody that Gunhead is a good movie. I'm not sure that it is a good movie, but I think it's interesting enough that it makes it worth watching. And it's certainly not a film that I would just sit down a bunch of people and say, hey, let's watch Gunhead. Hey, let's have a party, Gunhead. The party would end pretty quick. And so, like I said, it's a film that you kind of have to forgive on certain levels, but not enough that you have to sit there and, not enjoy it. I think it's visually interesting. The music is always cool, and it has moments along the way that will keep you, I think, satisfied, aesthetically as a viewer. But I have noticed over the past few years that Gunhead has undergone kind of a bit of a critical reevaluation, which is great. And there's, like I said, there's other videos out there talking about it, and I'll post some links down below you can check out. But definitely there clearly is an audience for this film, and clearly there's a fan base for this film, because just a couple years ago, they actually released this amazing 2-disc Blu-ray set in Japan, and it was an instant bestseller, by the way. And that just shows you the love that people have for Gunhead. Now, this Blu-ray cover art is rather forgettable, and I wish they would have used the poster. But it more than makes up for it in terms of its extras. And so, of course, I ordered this from CD Japan, and I think it was about $40. And so and I had some, discount points coming to me, so I used them. And so that's really nothing. And if you're a fan of this film, that's completely worth it. And it's got a really nice, typically attractive, packaging from Japan. And there's even, as they are wont to do, give us some nice schematics of Gunhead. There's also a nice little booklet. And the second disc is pretty cool because it has the TV version of Gunhead, which doesn't have all of the English language. And the disc comes in Dolby Audio, so it sounds fantastic. The picture is amazing. It's the best. This is the best Gunhead has ever looked, and I imagine they'll come out with a 4K probably in a year or so based on just the sales of this, but it looks fantastic. And photography has always been pretty dark in the film. That's been kind of a complaint about it, but in this case, finally, it just has that really great cyber blue sheen that you associate with James Cameron and even John Carpenter. And Masato Harada, had a really cool visual style for the film. And obviously he was influenced by James Cameron, and James Cameron was very impressed by Gunhead to the point where he actually had Masato Harada taken out to Hollywood, and they had some meetings about working on something together, and that never transpired, but that must have been very cool for the director to have that experience. And anybody who sees this film will be impressed by the visuals. So it makes sense that James Cameron would, recognize the tribute and also the technical accomplishment of the film. So if you're a fan of Japanese kaiju and science fiction and James Cameron and Howard Hawks, you're going to have a lot of fun with Gunhead. And I think it's completely worth having in your collection. It's a very unique film, and it does have its rewards. And for me, there's always this kind of, like I said, nostalgia for that Friday night when I discovered the world of Gunhead and then later visited Japan. And so there's a kind of romantic nostalgia I have for this film and this period. So thank you once again for retro viewing. Thank you for liking and subscribing and taking me over the 200 subscriber mark. Let's work our way up and tell all your friends. And to paraphrase the immortal words of Gunhead, remember, the true hero doesn't even know they're a hero.
If I don't see you again, it's been swell.